Today we're going to reseed this really quickly. I'm using, some of you came in late, so this will be nice and hopeful. This is the last time I'm going to repeat myself for the day though. All right, here's today's page. I'm using this Rhino file and this Grasshopper file, right? So there's a site model to use with the boundaries of city blocks and streets. And then there's this Grasshopper file that opens up and does the stuff with Rabbit. And again, just a quick reminder, if you're having issues, I don't know where Rhino went. Oh, there it is. Yeah, there's Windows. So if you're having issues with running or getting Rabbit to install, here's the zip file that I downloaded. I right-clicked and extracted it, right? Extract all, put it over here as a folder with several files in it, 2 to be exact. Let's see what those 2 files look like once Windows ever opens them up, sometime today, preferably. There we go. All right. So this is this rabbit.gha file. I can double-click on this web link, and it'll give me the instructions to install. Basically, you drag and drop that GHA file in a specific place. There are a few other things that you have to worry about. Okay, so sometimes Windows will look at this and go, this could be malicious. Did you intend to install this file or intend to download this file? That's not sure. Then it might block the file. So if you're not getting the install to work, you right-click and you go to the Properties box. And in this Properties box, there'll be an option to unblock the file. Once you do that and you hit OK or Apply or whatever, then you should be able to drag and drop it over in the right place. Close down Rhino, close down Grasshopper, open them back up, everything should instantiate just fine, okay? When that happens, half my day is just spent waiting for the computer to do things after I click on it. Let's see. Well, I don't know what that blue disk means, but I don't like it. I mean, sure, I just baked like bazillions, thousands of things in. Okay, there we go. All right. I'm just going to go back to perspective view. Parallel view just bugs the crap out of me. I don't know how people work with it in Revit. Ugh. It always looks like it's sort of the reverse, like it's that optical illusion of the axon. And I can't stand it. It drives me crazy. I love the drawings, but sort of moving them around in CAD views just drive. Ugh. All right. Anyway, right. So here's that Grasshopper file. You can see here. This is the that Rhino file with the city blocks. When you open up that Grasshopper file, let me just go back to its initial starting point here. I'll just right-click and say Clear Values. Right. So you can see that there's a Grasshopper grid overlaid on top of a Rhino city map, right? Okay. And basically all we have to do, if I go to top view in Rhino, is seed this grid, right? So in order to tell the cellular automaton system in Rabbit that a cell in a grid is live, we put a point inside of it, right? So if it has a point inside of it, it's alive. If it doesn't have a point inside of it, it's dead. Right? Okay, and so to seed this initially, I'm just going to go into Rhino. I'm just going to start to manually place points. I can copy now a point and just sort of place them wherever I want. And I can be very patterned about it, or I can be very random about it. Because what I can do then is bring these into Grasshopper as initial sort of seed condition, and then run the simulation, sort of see what grows, right? So again, this is the Grasshopper file. You can see it's kind of long from left to right there, but I'm going over to the left, looking for this initial orange box. Orange box or orange widget in Grasshopper means it doesn't have any information being fed into it, so it doesn't have any information. It's not doing anything, just there, waiting to collect information, right? So we have to give it a bunch of points. Luckily in Rhino, we just drew a bunch of points. So if I right-click on this and say set multiple points, Grasshopper disappears, allowing me to select points in Rhino and reference them into Grasshopper, which I do just there. Now I'm going to move from left to right, and I'm looking for this green circle. here in the somewhere towards the middle of the grasshopper definition, this manual time control, this number slider, is the number of generations, right? Okay, so let's look at what this does in perspective view, because what we're doing is we're literally growing things in the Z direction, so we can see how that plays out as we move the slider. So initial generation is this. If I tick this to the right one, then you can see that there's one generation, 2, 3. So some cells spring to life by reproduction, some get overcrowded and die. Others stay there living because they have the ideal conditions for not dying or growing, right? So anyway, you can see that these things start to grow up in the Z over time. In fact, what's interesting about this is, look at how that branched. Like it branched and then it branched. And if it branches again, that would be cool, although it looks like it's found, again, a sort of equilibrium point, a homeostasis. It looks like it's going back and forth between sort of this and that, this, that over and over again, right? So that's pretty predictable. If they grew out and split again, then the splits would actually start to hit each other, and then it would start to combine and do all kinds of crazy things. Some of them might die out from overpopulation, et cetera. But and that's the value here, right? Is to sort of think about how in generative design you set the rules, you set the conditions for how these things interact with each other. But playing this out over thousands of acres of city, right, over multiple generations would be really impractical for us to do as humans. Computers can do it like in a matter of seconds, right? Milliseconds, actually. Okay, so that's the sort of value proposition here, is to sort of think about how we can begin to think about a sort of rules-based urbanism, and then to sort of see how that might grow organically over time. Anyway. Not every city is based on a grid, right? Why are cities now primarily based on grids? First of all, because of cartography, we decided to impose a grid on the Earth, right? So we have things like latitude and longitude, which is just a grid wrapped around a sphere, right? Inside of that, we begin to partition land, particularly as we moved westwards, right? Into grids, into townships, into 6x6, 1 mile cells, right? And then gave it away as homesteads, right? So all of this sort of stuff, basically look at grids, right? And then it's easier to drive a car in a straight line, turns out, right? And it's honestly, it's easier to pave roads in straight lines, right? Yeah. Where is it not easy to pave roads in straight lines? When the ground isn't flat. And so you're moving up and down around mountains, in which case you're following contours, right? And switching back when you need to, or whatever, right? So we're trying to hit a certain pass through the mountains or whatever, right? So where are we going with this? Oh yeah, but before all of that, right? Like before we had cars and things like that, cities grew more organically, right? So if you look at cities, much older cities than Las Vegas, of course, which is a really young city, really young city. If you look at much older cities, right, they look like these sort of winding cellular sort of organizations, right? That grew based off of traffic via foot and animal and things like that, right? So, and they had to work. They couldn't just take dynamite and explode through the rock. They had to work with the landforms rather than just sort of carve through them and dominate them like humankind tends to do sometimes now. All right. So anyway, if you don't believe me, just go to Google Earth and look at some of the older cities along the northern coast of Africa, for instance. Gorgeous, really beautiful, tight, dense cities, very narrow, tall, self-shaded marketplaces, plazas, and streets, right? And if you go to any town that was started built medieval century on backwards, right? Oftentimes the streets are really narrow because they didn't have to deal with, we didn't see wide streets so we can put in a 6-lane highway, right? But we have really wide right-of-ways anyway for cars. Seems like out where I used to live, Sunset was still you could drop a 7-lane highway in there the right of ways are really ridiculously wide here, like unnecessarily so, I think. Anyway, that's my soapbox for the day. Sorry. So anyway, depending on how I begin to populate these points, right? That's how these things grow. And if I go all the way back, I'm just going back and forth between this widget, right, where I select the points and tell it which cells are live in the initial generation, the initial condition. I can clear the values. Right before class, I made a different sort of set of points. I'll just delete this. There they are. It's points. The layer points with an exclamation point on it. I was really excited, apparently. So again, if this is my initial seed where I've started to place points in each of these blocks, hopefully you can see that. I'll right-click on this widget, set multiple points, select all of these points. Right-click. There we go. Now it's growing upwards because I left my number slider back at 33, so it's going to generate 33 generations beyond that initial state. But if I tick this back, right, you can see that we can quite literally take it all the way back to generation 0 and then slowly grow it and decide where we want to stop it, right? Do we want a low-rise city? Do we want a medium-rise city? Do we want some high rises? Do we want it to be nice and thick and vertical or dense and vertical? You know, what's interesting about this, again, I think, is this idea that the built environment doesn't have to be constrained by roads, but we could actually grow over them, lean over them, begin to engage its neighbors. Right? So you can think about this maybe as a city of all kinds of complex units rather than the city of buildings, and each one sort of occupies a specific portion of the block. All right, and this is essentially what I want you to do today, right? Do 2 of these. So once I have this set, I look at those points and I say, okay, I'm going to put those on a specific layer, I'm going to label them, I'm going to save my Rhino file. Right? Which is what I've done, right? So there's points, save. Oh yeah. You can see that I actually saved this as a Rhino 6 version 6 file. So if you are running version 6 versus version 7, you can still open the file. Do you want to replace it? Yeah, well, yeah, of course. Yes, save. Oh, it's because I'm saving as a Rhino 6 file. Okay, yeah. There we go. All right. So what's a value here are these specific, let me turn off Grasshopper. What the hell happened? Oh, it's because I was turning off Rhino. Or did it crash? My system's been acting really weird today. I always blame the computer, not me. You know, a good craftsman never blames his crappy tools, right? That was supposed to be a joke. Kind of a lame one, honestly. Yeah, right, so there's those initial seeds again. I put them in their own layer, and I've saved that as a Rhino file, and man. And then I can go here, and I could say, let's make another one. Another layer, 0.2. All right, there we are. I can turn these off, and I can open up that Grasshopper script again, that graph. Right? So I recommend just doing it now. Like again, the whole point of this is you can do this in class and you have lots of work for this semester. The next time we meet, we will make a component and then populate each of these points with that component. So we actually start with cellular build up of, let's say, apartment units or building mass. And then the third meeting and last meeting, we'll format it all for the Axon drawings that you submit. So it'll be nice and quick and hopefully easy. Fingers crossed. Because you never know. Murphy's Law. All right, so there we go. Open recovery file. I don't know what that means, but sure, why not? Take this down to generation 0. It needs some points. All right, let's draw some points in Rhino again. All right. Can't wait. Just so excited. All right, there we go. Copy. Click, 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 click. Just doing this sort of randomly. I could do it random, or I could try to make some sort of pattern and see how it patterns out. after the fact, but. Now, if I filled in all of these, right, they would all die after the first generation because they'd all be overcrowded. So you gotta sort of work out, sort of spacing, right? Just like if you ever look at the Mojave Desert from above, you get up high and you look out. It's like the creosote is like spaced out in a particular way. Because there's only like so much resources for plants in the desert, right? So survival of the fittest says everything, there's only going to be one plant here that can recoup all those resources. The reason I know that is because, if you've ever been to like Portland in the forest, right? Our desert is nowhere near as dense as that. Okay. Right, so again, I'm just placing these. Now if I want to stop for a minute and test it, I can do that, right? Again, I can always go to perspective so I can see how it grows. Bring up Grasshopper again, and right click on this widget, set multiple points, select the points that I've made, I want to test out, right? Then go over here to the timeline and start to see how it grows. Oh, that's kind of nice. I like that. Wow, really sort of branching out. Ta-da! So the overgrowth over here shows up on the other end, right? Like on the other side of the map. Same thing over here. Shows up over there. Over here. Shows up over there. All right. And so once I'm satisfied with that, I go, okay, let's do another block. Let's give that block a little friend, shall we? All right, clear values. Minimize that, get it out of the way. I like to work in top view when I'm trying to place something in a grid like this, just so I know exactly where in Z it's going to happen. Maybe I'll try a pattern of some weird way. I don't know what'll happen here. This could be a complete disaster. But I'll never know until I try, right? It might be underpopulated. So how's it going back there? Anybody having major issues? Or you just... Is it working? Yeah? All right. Yay. All right. Yeah, I'm easily impressed, so I like it when things just work. Usually for me that's just half the battle. Oh, no, it actually grew. Look at that. Grew outwards like a tree. Yeah. And then up. Odd. And then it met something here, and then it eventually fizzled out. Look at that. Wild. Yeah, right? And so on and on. Let's float around. See how it's going. Look at that. Wow. No, you're not screwing around there. Look at that. You have the components. You're ready to turn it in almost. I have to grade all those drink shots. Whoa. This is nasty. A little bit of time, a little bit of nastiness. All right. Hey, by the way, they're selling tamales upstairs. Some of you found out. If you're interested all day, hungry, and what's lunch. Yeah, it's because there's nothing here. So they all died. They don't none of them have racial honor because they have no honor. So remember the rules. So you need to add more points. Once you do that, Nothing's turning red, so it doesn't look like it's broken. You're just gonna. It's just like that lone settlement out in Antarctica, right? You know, you just put one person there. Eventually, that person's going to die, and there's not going to be a second generation. Right? Probably. Can you imagine going to Antarctica? That'd be weird. I'm like trying to think of like how you'd even get there. That'd be really bizarre. Boat? Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Okay, I'll go ahead and conclude this recording.